Imagine standing on the cobblestone streets of Oldham, Lancashire, on a cold morning in 1860. It is barely 5 o'clock, and already the sky above you is blackened, not by storm clouds, but by the smoke of nearly 200 cotton mill chimneys, each one belching coal smoke into the grey English dawn. A deep thundering bell splits the silence, then another, and another, until the entire town reverberates with the iron clamour of factory bells, summoning tens of thousands of men, women and children from their cramped, terraced houses. Within minutes, the streets flood with workers, their clogs hammering against the wet stone, in a rhythmic stampede toward the towering brick mills that dominate every horizon. This is Oldham at the height of its power, the cotton spinning capital of the world. And today, we are going inside. To understand what is about to happen behind those mill walls, you first need to know where it all begins. And it begins 4,000 miles away, on the slave plantations of the American South. In 1860, Oldham receives nearly 8% of America's entire slave-grown cotton crop. To put that in human terms, it takes over 200,000 enslaved African workers to grow, pick, and bale the raw cotton that feeds this single Lancashire town. The cotton, mostly short-staple American upland, known in the trade as middling Orleans, arrives in compressed bales at the Liverpool docks, having crossed the Atlantic in the holds of merchant ships. Each bale weighs roughly 400 pounds and is bound tight with iron hoops and wrapped in coarse jute cloth. From Liverpool, the bales travel by rail along the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway, climbing through the valleys and moors until they reach the warehouses and loading bays of Oldham's mills. Let us follow one of these bales now, from the moment it arrives at a mill gate to the moment it becomes finished yarn, ready to be shipped to the weaving towns of Burnley and Blackburn. The mill we enter is a typical Oldham spinning mill of this era, a 5 or 6 story building of red brick, perhaps 90 meters long and 14 meters wide, with rows of tall windows running along each side to catch every possible scrap of daylight. The engine house sits at one end, and you can hear it before you see it. The deep rhythmic thump of a steam engine, its massive beam rising and falling with the steady breath of a mechanical giant. This engine, perhaps built by Bolton and Watt, or one of the local firms, generates around 50 horsepower, driving every machine in the building through a network of vertical shafts, bevel gears, and horizontal line shafts that run the entire length of each floor. The journey of cotton through this mill begins at the very bottom, in the blowing room. This is the most dangerous room in the entire building, and the one most likely to catch fire, which is why a thick crosswall separates it from the rest of the structure. Here, workers use hooked tools to tear open the iron hoops and jute wrapping of the compressed bales. The raw cotton inside is dirty. It is full of seeds, broken leaf fragments, sand, and tiny stones picked up during harvest and transport. The bale breaker pulls apart the dense matted cotton and feeds it into a series of opening machines, beaters and scutchers, that thrash the fibres violently, shaking loose the heaviest impurities. The air in this room is thick with dust and fine cotton particles that drift like snow in the gaslight. Workers wrap cloth around their mouths and noses, though it does little good. The noise is tremendous, a constant mechanical roar that forces workers to communicate through hand signals and lip reading. After passing through the openers and scutchers, the cotton emerges as a flat, continuous sheet of loosely arranged fibres called a lap, wound onto a large roller roughly a metre wide. These laps are carried upstairs, sometimes by hand, sometimes by a simple hoist, to the carding room, which occupies an entire floor of the mill. This is where the real transformation begins. Carding engines, many of them built right here in Oldham by Platt brothers, are massive machines, fitted with cylinders covered in thousands of tiny wire teeth. As the cotton lap is fed through, these wire teeth comb through every fibre, pulling them straight, removing the last remaining impurities and aligning them all in the same direction. What comes out the other side is a soft, rope-like strand called a sliver, about as thick as a man's thumb and as delicate as a spider's web. The carding room is overwhelmingly a female domain. Women and girls stand at the machines hour after hour, feeding in laps, watching for tangles, and doffing the full cans of sliver when they are ready. A typical mill of this size might have 90 or more carding engines running simultaneously, their wire-covered cylinders spinning in the humid, heated air. From the carding room, the slivers move to the drawing frames, where several slivers are combined and drawn out together through a series of paired rollers, each set running slightly faster than the one before it. This process blends the fibres for consistency and begins to thin the strand, stretching and elongating it while keeping the fibres parallel. The drawn sliver is then passed to the slubbing frames, and from there to the intermediate frames, and finally to the roving frames, each stage progressively stretching the cotton thinner and thinner, adding a slight twist for strength. By the time it leaves the roving frame, the cotton has been transformed from a thumb-thick rope into a fine, delicate strand called a roving, wound onto wooden bobbins. These bobbins are what the spinning room has been waiting for. Now we climb to the upper floors, the spinning rooms, the very heart of the mill. And nothing in the building has prepared you for what you see here. The spinning room stretches out before you like a cathedral of iron and wood. Running the entire length of the room in pairs are the self-acting spinning mules, the machines that made Oldham famous. Each mule is enormous. The carriage alone, the moving part that draws the cotton out and twists it into yarn, can be 150 feet long, carrying up to 1,320 spindles. The carriage rolls forward on iron rails set into the floor, drawing out the roving from the bobbins, stretching it and twisting it simultaneously. Then it pauses, reverses, and rolls back, winding the newly spun yarn onto small conical tubes called cops. This cycle, draw out, twist, wind back, repeats 4 times every minute, and the mule moves with a strange, hypnotic grace, like some great mechanical animal breathing in and out. These are self-acting mules, the design perfected here in Oldham and built by Platt brothers, whose massive works on the Hertford New Road employ around 4,000 men and boys. Platt brothers have systematically improved every element of the spinning process, the carding engine, the roving frame, and above all, the self-acting mule, which is faster, longer, and more productive than any rival's machine. Their mules are the finest in the world, and Oldham's mill owners know it. In fact, many of Platt's own workmen have become shareholders in the spinning companies that buy their machines, binding the fortunes of the engineering works and the cotton mills tightly together. Each pair of mules is worked by a team of 3: the minder, a skilled adult man, and his 2 assistants, the big piecer and the little piecer. The minder is the aristocrat of the mill floor. He is responsible for the quality and quantity of yarn his mules produce, and he is paid well for it, his wages calculated by the piece. He watches the mules with an expert eye, adjusting tension, checking the yarn, and ensuring the cops are built correctly on the spindles. The big piecer, usually a teenager, walks alongside the carriage, rapidly tying together any threads that break during the draw. His fingers move with astonishing speed, twisting the broken ends back together in a fraction of a second before the mule completes its stroke. The little piecer, often a child of 8 or 9, does the same on the lower spindles, crouching and bending constantly throughout the entire shift. And then there are the scavengers, the youngest and smallest children in the mill, some as young as 4 years old. Their job is to crawl beneath the mule carriage while it is in motion, sweeping up the loose cotton waste and oil that accumulates on the floor. The cotton is too valuable to leave, so these tiny children dart underneath the massive moving carriage, gathering handfuls of fluff and fiber before scrambling back out before the carriage returns. The minder does not stop the machine for them. He is paid by output, and every second the mule stands idle costs him money. The scavengers time their movements to the rhythm of the machine. In when the carriage goes out before it comes back. Misjudge the timing by even a moment, and a child can be crushed or entangled in the moving ironwork. Injuries are common. These children work the same 14 to 16-hour shifts as the adults, and if they fall asleep from exhaustion, they are beaten. The conditions on the spinning floor are, in their own way, as brutal as the blowing room, just differently so. The temperature is kept deliberately high, and the air saturated with moisture. Humidifiers spray jets of water into the atmosphere to prevent the cotton threads from snapping. In summer, the heat becomes almost unbearable. Workers drip with sweat, their thin cotton clothing clinging to their bodies. A surgeon who visited a Manchester mill around this time reported that he could not remain 10 minutes inside without gasping for breath. The air is thick with cotton dust, tiny fibres that lodge in the lungs and over years and decades cause the chronic respiratory disease that will later be called biocinosis. The noise is so intense that workers develop their own form of lip reading to communicate, a practice that will become known as meemawing across the Lancashire mill towns. But the mules keep turning, 4 strokes a minute, 1,320 spindles per mule. A single floor might hold 60 or more mules, and across Oldham's roughly 200 mills, there are millions upon millions of spindles, a concentration of spinning power unmatched anywhere on Earth. By 1871, just 11 years from now, Oldham alone will have more spindles than any country in the world, except the United States of America. By 1909, it will be spinning more cotton than France and Germany combined. The yarn that comes off these mules, twisted, strong and uniform, is wound onto the cops and carried down to the warehouse on the ground floor. Here, it is sorted by count, the measure of its fineness. Oldham specializes in coarse and medium counts, using the short staple American cotton that arrives by the shipload in Liverpool. The finished yarn is packed into bundles and loaded onto carts for the railway station, destined for the weaving towns of East Lancashire, Burnley, Blackburn, Nelson, where it will be woven into calico, shirting, and the plain cotton cloth that is shipped to every corner of the British Empire and beyond. The entire Lancashire cotton industry in 1860 imports nearly £1.4 billion of raw cotton per year and exports over £2.7 billion yards of finished cloth, with a total export value of £32 million. Step back outside onto the streets of Oldham, and you see the human architecture that supports this colossal enterprise. Rows upon rows of workers' terraced houses climb the hillsides surrounding the mills, each one home to a family whose every member, father, mother and children, works in cotton. Entire families are employed in the same mill. The father might be a minder on the spinning floor. The mother works in the carding room. The eldest daughter is a big piecer. The youngest son is a scavenger. Their combined wages, paid by the piece not by the hour, constitute the family's entire income. If the mill stops, the family starves. And the mills are about to stop. What no one in Oldham fully grasps on this morning, in 1860, is that the entire edifice, the 200 mills, the millions of spindles, the tens of thousands of workers, rests on a single fragile supply chain that stretches across the Atlantic Ocean to the cotton plantations of the American South. Over 80% of the cotton processed in Lancashire's mills is grown by enslaved people on those plantations. And in the American South, political tensions are reaching a breaking point. Within a year, the Confederate States will secede from the Union. War will erupt. The Union Navy will blockade southern ports. And the cotton will stop coming. When it does, Oldham and all of Lancashire will be plunged into what becomes known as the cotton famine. The price of raw cotton, Middling Orlins, the benchmark grade, will skyrocket from 7 3/4 pence a pound in June of 1861 to 2 shillings and 5 pence by 1863. Mills will fall silent. Workers will be thrown out onto the streets. By the worst months of 1862 and 1863, 1/3 of families in some Lancashire towns will be on poor relief. Men who have spent their entire lives in the warm, humid spinning rooms will be sent to break stones in quarries in the freezing rain, outdoor work for which their dust-damaged lungs are utterly unsuited. But Oldham will not simply accept its fate. The Platt brothers' works will collaborate with mill owners to adapt their self-acting mules to spin surat cotton, the short, dirty, difficult fibre imported from India as a substitute for the vanished American supply. The machines will clog and break. The yarn will be weak and uneven. A loom running on surat cotton will produce barely 40% of its normal output. Workers, paid by the piece, will see their wages slashed. But the mills will keep running, some of them at least, and Oldham will survive. More than survive. During the famine years and the boom that follows, Oldham will surpass Manchester and Bolton to become the undisputed metropolis of cotton spinning. New mills will be built, bigger, more efficient, powered by more advanced engines running at higher pressures. The old family-run firms will give way to joint stock limited companies, the so-called Oldham Limiteds, that raise capital from ordinary working people, including Platt brothers' own workmen, who invest their savings in the very mills their machines will equip. By 1900, Oldham will accurately claim to be the largest cotton spinning town on the face of the earth. By 1903, the Oldham district will contain 270 mills, housing 12.5 million spindles and 18,000 looms, absorbing roughly 1/4 of all the cotton imported into Britain. And by 1916, 30% of Lancashire's total spindlage will be concentrated in this single town. But all of that lies in the future, here in 1860, on this cold morning in the blowing room, in the carding room, on the spinning floor. This is where it is being built. Every bale torn open, every sliver drawn, every cop wound on every spindle, every child crawling beneath the mule carriage. This is the engine room of the Industrial Revolution, not a single dramatic invention, but the relentless, grinding daily reality of hundreds of thousands of ordinary people, transforming raw cotton into the fabric of the modern world. 200 mills, millions of spindles, a town consumed by cotton, built on cotton, breathing cotton, and standing unknowingly on the edge of the greatest crisis it has ever faced. The bells ring again, the shift changes, and the mules keep turning.